The same people who are saying, come open the borders, come here, these are the same people who are not doing the work in the grassroots to help them.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for The Forum, author and speaker. Most of the topics on Matters of Soul Importance are evergreen, and at the end of the last episode, I'd promised a sequel to Does the Church Hate Sex? That's still coming, but I'm grateful to be able to discuss something else today, something timely. The topic of immigration seems to be on everyone's mind these days. President Trump focused on it heavily during his campaign, and the chatter about immigration, especially illegal immigration, has been nonstop ever since. The views are many, but how does a Christian respond? More to the point, how does a Christian who adheres strongly to Jesus' command to keep the dignity of the human person in mind while also observing some of the dangers of illegal immigration, find peaceful resolve within the heart? Ramona and I recently had a conversation about this issue by phone and realized we could dedicate an episode to the question, is supporting illegal immigration pro-life? While we're both still learning and trying to understand everything at stake, Ramona has a decidedly unique perspective in being a firm pro-life advocate, Christian, and woman of color with Mexican Spanish heritage. In today's episode, she'll illuminate how pro-lifers are often caught in the middle of this conversation in their attempts to serve the abortion-prone, many of whom are emerging from a broken immigration system. The open borders make these women even more vulnerable, she told me. We have to really consider what happens to them when they come over here. You'll find more of Ramona's background in episode 22, Is the Church's Stance on Birth Control Out of Touch? Today, we'll jump straight into the topic, so let's delay no further. Well, welcome back, Ramona, to Matters of Soul Importance. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great, Roxanne. I'm so glad to be on with you again.
Yeah, we have an important topic to discuss today. We're going to talk about illegal immigration and if that is pro-life. And I know that's a timely topic. Everyone seems to be discussing it right now, and it's something that's come up in a phone conversation we had recently. And one of the things I love about our friendship is that we can be so honest about just everyday things and also the things that are going on in the world. And we enjoy our times trying to figure all this stuff out from our couch, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
um but I mean, this is the time we're living in. We're mothers, we're concerned about the future and in our country, and so it's fair game for us. So I want to start this morning. We've done an episode with you before. You've shared a little bit about your background, but I want to hear again what you do for your work and also your heritage, where your family's from originally, and to kind of pair it with this conversation we're having today.
Yeah, so I am the director of outreach with 40 Days for Life and a former Planned Parenthood manager. So I left the abortion industry. Let's see, it's been 13 years ago now, and left the abortion industry, had a major conversion and reclaimed my walk with Christ and became a very outspoken pro lifer. It just became very outspoken in defense of the preborn and obviously too just in defense of my faith and now work for 40 days, which has been fantastic. And just aside from that, I'm a mom and a wife and a grandmother. So I'm Hispanic. My uh, great grandparents immigrated to Texas in the early 1900s, so our family's been here for quite a long time now. I'm fourth generation American, and I think this is an important topic. I think uh, obviously, like you said, you and I have had these discussions and we talk about these important things, and we look at it from the lens of Catholic women, as Christians, as people who have a heart for others. But that doesn't mean we can't also have some sense about things, right? And so I think
Mhm.
this is why it's such an important discussion to have, especially as people who are pro-life, who defend the unborn, and who care about women and mothers in crisis. I think it all ties in together. And you obviously had a great tie-in when you and I were talking about this. You want to share that with everybody?
Yeah, well, one of the things before, and I will share that, because I think it bears, some insight here that's important to the conversation, but the first thing I wanna kinda lay out there is that the church, founded by Jesus Christ really looks at each individual as having great dignity, no matter where they're from, no matter what language they speak, whether they're female or male, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's Our Lord looks at every human person as a jewel, as someone sacred, as someone that he wants to be joined with forever in eternity, and that's without exception. So, that I think has to be kind of at the forefront of our conversation, because I think some people that think that, the restrictions are too harsh, or that, we should open our borders to everyone, maybe would see people like us who think maybe there should be we do know that there should be restrictions, that we've had a crisis going on, and that we have to be thoughtful about it. Um, we sometimes are perceived as the bad guys, the mean ones, and yet at the same time, that is not it at all. We actually are seeking the good of all, and so I hope, like, during our conversation, we can kind of illuminate our hearts on that point, because that's where it begins and ends also. Um, but yeah, as a fellow, as a sidewalk advocate here, for the Fargo Moorhead area, it used to be that we had North Dakota's only abortion facility in Fargo, and then when Roe v. Wade fell, it moved across the river to Moorhead, Minnesota, which has some of the least restrictive laws on abortion in the country. It's kind of a safe haven for those seeking abortion, I guess, is what they want to be known as. But even before we moved over to Moorhead, we have quite a lot of people who have immigrated from Africa, African nations, Sudanese, and Liberia, and so we've been experiencing a lot of people of color. I would say maybe the majority who are seeking abortion. I also am aware that a lot of the African nations are very pro-life, and I've seen,
Mhm.
how they have resisted the Americans, kind of coming down and trying to, assert our mentality when it comes to abortion, birth control, and such. So, I'm very aware, and I know people from Africa who affirm that they're very pro-life. So, it's been jarring as sidewalk advocates to watch these women come in, and I've had conversations with some of them, and they've made it clear that they don't want abortion, but without going into a huge explanation, they've said, I have to." And I have gotten the sense over the years through just different conversations that is not what their heart wants at all. They don't want to kill their children, but somehow they've been led to believe that in order to survive in this country, they have to that's one of the things they have to do. So,
Mhm.
in other words, we let people in and then basically say, we want you, we want the people, but we don't want your offspring.
Right.
If that's gonna get in the way and make us, if it's not gonna work out, we'll just send you to the abortion facility, and you can get rid of those. That's what I've been seeing, that's what I've been sensing. Do I have hard data that there's agencies here sending them over there? No, but it seems to be the case. I
Right.
again, we've talked before about using our human reasoning, and I think we can, deduce that these women that are coming over who are from other nations that are very pro-life wouldn't be seeking abortion in their own country. They would be surrounded by loving family members who would help them raise up their children. That's how it works down there in their villages.
Well,
They're
they'd be
very,
celebrating.
very family oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, they
And
would be
so
celebrating these this new life.
yeah,
Sure.
and you can see it. You know what, Ramona? I can see it in their face. I
Mhm.
can see it in their face, and some of them have responded, and we've had saves, and they're jubilant because they're reconnecting with the heart of their home country, and who they were raised up to be. So I've been concerned about the African immigrants that have come, and they seem to be dragging their feet to have an abortion, which most people are, inwardly at least, but in a certain way that has really been alarming to me. So that's been my experience here, and I know you have your own thoughts about it.
Yeah, and, part of my work with 40 Days for Life as the director of outreach is visiting campaigns throughout the country and even just being able to have the blessing and privilege to travel also internationally. And one of the things that we are trying to promote on my side is the outreach to the Hispanic community. And I've been really blessed to see it growing and our leaders really taken to this idea of offering, a bilingual type of event so that we can do the outreach so that when I come in and visit that I'm not just presenting in English, but also I'm able to present in Spanish to the Hispanic community. And it's been very eye opening, Roxanne, extremely eye opening because I live in Texas. Obviously, there is a very high Hispanic population in Texas. There always has been, but it's grown quite a bit in the recent years. And one of the things that has been really eye opening to me is when I'm traveling, is to see how much the Hispanic population has grown in states where it's unexpected. Like for example, in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I actually had an event in September in the fall where our leader hosted a bilingual event. So he did, a Spanish event on one evening and then brought me back the next day for an English presentation. But I was completely blown away by the event in Spanish and it exceeded all of our expectations. There were approximately 200 people in attendance at the church, and they were all, newly immigrated here to the US. They were only all Spanish speakers, and what was very eye-opening is that none of them were familiar with the term pro-life. None of
Mm,
them were familiar with the term pro-life, and what that meant is that they're inherently pro-life. So why would their position ever
mm,
to be to distinguish themselves as pro-life versus pro-abortion, right? So that was something that is just it's new to them. It was new to them. This term pro-life. What does that mean?
mm.
And not
Wow.
only that, but in kind of giving them the background and the education about, the foundress of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, kind of walking them through, our history with abortion. That was new to them as well. They had no idea. They didn't really they've never heard of Planned Parenthood. And then to like tell them, that Planned Parenthood is called Pro Familia in Mexico and in some of the countries in Latin America. They had no idea. So this was all news to them. And so you can imagine, even, you were talking about, people from the African countries who are very pro-life. Well, it's the same thing in Mexico and Latin America. This idea of abortion and legalizing abortion is more of a novel idea that is being promoted, that is being brought to their countries by the United States. We're the ones who are
Mhm.
trying to take abortion worldwide and who is giving abortion to these countries. And so it's really important for us as pro-lifers to be able to continue to spread this message of life and to educate people, especially immigrants, because
Mhm.
they have no idea what, when they're coming here unless they're in these situations where they find themselves in crisis, right? That is when, they're being exposed to it. And oftentimes they're not even really in crisis per se, but they're going to seek help for their pregnancy. They're going to get care for their pregnancy. And instead of receiving care, they're being told that, they're being referred for abortion, which is tragic.
You brought up Margaret Sanger. I think that's a fitting topic to discuss. You have been out to where she grew up and even in the church where she was baptized. Tell me a little bit about Margaret Sanger, the truth of this woman who has perpetuated and who really was the beginning of Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, so Margaret Sanger was the driving force behind Planned Parenthood, and what we know from her history and from her founding of Planned Parenthood over 100 years ago. What we know about Margaret Sanger, in terms of just her advancing her ideologies of expanding this, um, promoting Planned Parenthood, is we first of all need to understand that Planned Parenthood used to be called the American Birth Control League. And, she was promoting this idea of, only a certain amount of babies need to be born. She was into eugenics and believed that only certain races needed to procreate. She obviously, just from her writings and what you read and, look at history, is she uh, wanted to exterminate the Negro population. She wanted to stop immigrants from procreating. So, the American Birth Control League, as she tried to expand this, wasn't really gaining traction, especially with the name, because people weren't really warming up to the idea of birth control, like the word control in the name, right? So she switched it to Planned Parenthood and was able to kind of play with the semantics, and that warmed people up more to the idea that when I worked for Planned Parenthood, one of the things that sticks out in my mind, a memory, are is stationary cards that we had. So these blank cards that had the image of Margaret Sanger, a black and white image on the front, and then the quote that every child should be a wanted child. And
Mm,
that
mhm.
that is a memory that just kind of just it's vivid, and it just is seared into my mind. Um, that every child should be a wanted child, and yet, we know that
Yeah.
every child is wanted. Every child is wanted.
We go back to the dignity of the human person, and when you hear that every child should be a wanted child, it sounds like just on first glance, like, "Oh, that's so sweet." Like, yeah, and then it just, like, makes me wanna vomit just thinking about what that actually means.
Yeah.
The
And
the
what it meant
implications of that line. Yeah.
Yeah, what it meant to Margaret Sanger, that only
Mhm.
certain children, should be here, and that, if you fit the right description, if you're born to the right person, and then not only that, but if you're unwanted by the mother or the father, therefore you're disposable.
She was very egocentric and ethnocentric. Whatever she thought things should be like, get rid of it's kind of like the cancel culture thing. If you don't, like, kind of fit into a certain narrative, you just get rid of you. Just get rid of. It's just we have that, it's that throwaway culture, right? Just get rid of the unwanteds. I think she called people of color, weeds to get to be chopped down, right? And just
Yeah,
get rid of, I mean,
weeds.
I'm
Mhm.
sorry, but it's not humane at all, and that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about abortion. So, then people come over and they're vulnerable. That's one of the things I think we should talk about. There's a vulnerability to being an immigrant, but especially an illegal immigrant, and you have a story also about, someone that you've heard about recently who came from Honduras. Do you wanna share a little bit about that? Because that really, to me, speaks to that vulnerability that we're not really being mindful of how people that are coming over are really actually, like, having to live. Like, we're so detached from that it's concerning. So, share a little bit about that to illuminate those one of those stories.
Yeah, so, this is obviously one story of many stories, and hopefully we'll have time to share a few more, but this is actually something I just heard of, just a couple days ago. So, one of our 40 Days for Life leaders, who is, just an amazing woman and has such a heart, for serving people, she, outside of her work in 40 Days for Life, she helps a lot of immigrants, and she herself is, an immigrant from Colombia, so she's here legally, but that doesn't mean that her life is any easier, right? But she is such a gift, and God is using her in so many beautiful ways. But so because she's an immigrant, she really obviously her heart is to serve the immigrant, and of course it's useful because she's bilingual and is able to communicate with people. But she was sharing this really gut wrenching story with me of a 19-year-old girl who's here from Honduras. She is here illegally, and she's facing extreme hardships. Of poverty is just insane. She said she's a bag of bones. She's like, Ramona. They barely have anything to eat. She's got a little toddler, and now she's pregnant, and she was going to abort, and she was able to intervene. And she said, cannot we cannot abort this baby. You can't do this, and you can't do it just on the basis of you're how are you going to, questioning how is she going to provide. She said, I will walk with you. I will be here. I'm not going to abandon you. We will be here for you. and help you. I mean, she's like a Mother Teresa, right? Um,
Mhm.
so it was beautiful. She was able to get her into the PRC, the Pregnancy Resource Center. The beautiful thing about the pregnancy resource centers is that, none of these are government funded. They're all supported by, church, the body of Christ, who donate and they fundraise, and um, the communities, lift these PRCs up to be able to help women in crisis. And there's no one there checking, immigration status or anything. You know what I mean? Like these are legitimate places that want to help women, and so she took her to the PRC. The PRC is helping her, has her on prenatal vitamins. She's been able to have her first ultrasound. She is they've given her food and for herself, and have helped her with, like some, I guess maybe Pediasure or something like that for her little toddler to kind of help supplement, the nutrition. And they've been able to really step in and help her and reassure her that they're going to walk with her and stay with her for the first 5 years of her baby's life. That's the other thing that, we often get accused of in the pro-life movement, that, we only care about the babies and we don't care about them once they're born, which couldn't be a bigger lie, because you and I both
Mhm.
know that there's so much more involved in helping these women in crisis. Obviously, you and I are focused on a particular mission, but that doesn't stop, once the baby is born, and it doesn't stop end there. So, I think it's beautiful for us as pro-lifers to know firsthand what's happening in the grassroots, and who better than those of us who are working in the grassroots, right, to know what's happening. But
Yeah.
these stories are gut wrenching. They're painful, but then there's also just this beautiful light that shines in the darkness when you hear stories like people like our leaders who step in and are really helping. But again, I think it really just illustrates the pain and suffering that is happening and how vulnerable these women are. I think that's what we're forgetting in this conversation, is that we're seeing, it's easy for people to point the finger and say, okay, let's open the borders, let people in, and pretend that once they're here, that's it. They're here, and everything is going to be great. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right, and also, they are particularly vulnerable because they've been cut off from their homeland, they've been cut off from their kin and all of the support they would have had, and so, we need to think about those things too, and not always just see ourselves as this wonderful nation that just has, a super abundant resources that are inexhaustible. There is, there's a balance there. We're both Catholics, and without, quoting the catechism, which can be dry at times, I have been hearing about it, reading about it, and I can summarize it this way. We do as a church believe that Jesus Christ believes that migration is a just thing for people to pursue, especially in certain circumstances when their home country is not able to provide and they're starving and there are other richer countries that can take them in. However, there is a condition on that the home country is able to take them in, and I know one of the things that we've talked about before, and it's been a just analogy, I think, when we're talking about letting everyone in, we wouldn't do that for our own families, our own houses. We do have to have, we do have to have walls. We have walls on our houses to protect our own people, and I think that that's important to recognize too. Also, there should be a burden placed on some of the other countries. It can't just always be America saving everyone, but individually, yes, like what you said. I was thinking about as you were telling that story of the woman who's living in, this trailer house. Um, think of if she hadn't connected with the pregnancy resource center. If she'd gone and had her abortion, would she be better off?
Right. It would not have eliminated the poverty in which she lives. I mean, we're talking about a woman who she's, this our leader. She said, Ramona, I went into her home, and her trailer home. It's such a horrible condition that they have to be careful about where they step, because they're can see the ground in some places. Like you can step through the floor, and so then you think to yourself, okay. If that were someone who was a US citizen and someone had witnessed that situation, they would have called CPS and they would have reported, the situation because the child is living in dangerous conditions, right?
Mhm.
And in this case, you think to yourself, "Well, we wouldn't wanna do that to this person," right? Because she's here, she's frightened, she's living in the shadows. The last thing that she needs is to have her child taken away from her, right? Because then you get into all of these other issues with
Mm.
legal stuff, right? And so it's just this ongoing,
Mm.
cycle, right, of suffering that you're trying to eliminate as much suffering as you can for this mama, and you already recognize that she's in a very difficult situation. And like I said before, it's just the tip of the iceberg because you I have countless stories from other leaders who've worked with migrant women, and oftentimes what we also see is they're coming here with their boyfriends, with their husbands even, and their husbands leave them once they get here and they find out they're pregnant. So they come here promising something to their wife or to their girlfriend, they become pregnant, and then they leave them and abandon them. And these women are now not only in crisis because they've been abandoned, but they're even in more crisis because they don't speak the language. They are here illegally. They don't have a job. They don't have employment that pays just wages. They oftentimes also are illiterate. We have a leader, well, she's not a leader, she's a volunteer in Florida, who said, Ramona, oftentimes these are oftentimes also indigenous women who come here with a dialect that isn't even known to any of us. We can't even communicate with them in Spanish. They're in really serious situations. And again, they were promised something that didn't pan out, and now they're left alone and they're abandoned. We had another young situation in with the leader who said, there was a woman who was pregnant, and because she was pregnant, she was fired from her job, and she couldn't fight it because she was here illegally. And she was going to get a late term abortion. I think she was 6 months pregnant. So the employer fired her because she was pregnant, and got away with it. And thankfully, this leader was able to intervene and help save this baby and walk along with this mom. And the mom now is eternally grateful, but again, you look at it and you go, that should have never happened. No one should have ever fired her for being pregnant, but she couldn't seek legal recourse because of the situation she was in. So,
Mm.
we're not looking at all of these stories. We're only looking at, people who are here with their families, who, have a home, who have seem to have, their life together, and their work, they work hard, and they're, just um living the dream, right? But that's not the case for most of these people.
I'm gonna pose a question. I'm not sure if you're prepared to answer, but I one of my friends put something on Facebook about, all the starving children that are being deported. Is that what's happening? Are we just taking these families and throwing them back? I I don't know. I don't think so.
I live in Texas, and you would think that I would know that this is happening, right? I'm unaware of any of that happening. If it is, I don't know where it's happening at, but I haven't seen anything happening here in my home state.
And then the other point that's a little bit different from that is this idea that the government's supposed to take care of everything. That's one of the things we've talked about before. That isn't how it should be. And as you told me, it's offensive to us as the body of Christ that we're just supposed to toss everything to the big guy. And then we just wash our hands, right? We don't have anything to do because the government's doing it all. I mean, that's another danger here that we're relying so much on the government to take care of, the people in our lives around us that we've been given to care for. I think that's another issue that's part of this, another layer that we just expect. And I think that's part of the people that say, let everyone in. It's just let
Mhm.
the government do it. But the government can't the government's limited as well.
Yeah, we're going bankrupt. We're going bankrupt.
Yeah.
But again, that you bring up a good point in that, Roxanne, because it's funny that, one of the things that I've noticed are the people who are the loudest and who are the most angry about this because, and here's the thing. We have to have reform. We have to, because it's not just for the US citizens that we need reform for. It's not just for our own sovereignty that we need reform, but we also need reform because those who we are inviting to our country deserve better. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's the way I look at it. It's like you as an immigrant deserve better. And if you're going to come to our country, we want what's best for you. We don't want you to come here and be employed and basically be a slave laborer because of your legal status, and then, get paid unjust wages. That is not Christ-like. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening, and it's wrong. And so when you hear these stories of people saying, I've read so many Facebook comments over and over, well, who's going to do this and who's going to do this job and who's going to do that job? And it's infuriating to me, because it's like, I think that you think by saying that somehow you're supporting these people, but in all reality, it's just a false mercy, because they deserve just wages like everyone else, and it's not fair to have this mentality of, well, it's much better life than what you had in your country. Um,
Mhm.
we talk so much about equality in this country, and yet um, we have this attitude of, well, they're here and they have the things that they need, and it's a much better life than what they had in their country. And somehow that makes it all okay, to not pay someone a just wage, or that this person cannot access medical care, or this person cannot access, the things that all other US citizens are able to access and have the ability to qualify for. It's just not fair to give this to have this mentality, right? And so I think, that's the perspective that people like you and me, we have this perspective of, we want people to come here and to have dignity. We want them to
Yeah.
feel that they have dignity. And when you become dependent and reliant on the government, that is stripped away from you. Um, and the same people who are saying, come open the borders, come here, these are the same people who are not doing the work in the grassroots to help them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Saying, "Okay, you're here, and now I'm the good guy because I'm
Yep.
okay with being here, and I'm the one who's defending you, and I'm the one who is saying, like, all of the, deportations or whatever reforms happening, that this is all wrong, and therefore it's kind of like this virtue signaling, like,
Mhm.
I'm the good guy." But where are you in the grassroots to help these people? Where are you to help the woman from Honduras whose baby is hungry and who is pregnant and who's about to get an abortion? Their solution is the abortion. Their
Mhm.
solution is, go get the abortion, because then I don't have to take care of you. I don't have
Yep.
to do the hard work. Go get the abortion and then get on government assistance, because I don't actually have to do the work that Christ has called me to, just feed the hungry and give drink to the thirsty and give shelter to the homeless, right? Like, this is what's most infuriating to me, is that there is this virtue signaling based off of just stop being racist and deportations are wrong and this mission, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Mhm.
but where
Mhm.
are you in the grassroots? Where
Mhm.
are you in actually helping these people? And I can say this because I've been, you know, I'm in Texas and I am bilingual, and I've been helping people for so long, with the exception of the stint in Planned Parenthood. But I think even then, that gives me great perspective, because I saw how, when I worked for Planned Parenthood, they were targets. We were targeting migrant women. We weren't helping them. So again, it was to fulfill, this ongoing mission that Margaret Sanger had, which was to get rid of the unwanted, to get rid of the undesirable in her eyes.
Right. Oh man, it's just it's sad when you start peering into it. And I think of some of the people too that are speaking the loudest that would prefer just to throw more tax of their tax money to the government so that the government can take care of it again. We're not they're not in touch with the reality. And you've been able to see these things and see the hurting people and hear these stories. And where is the dignity? I remember you saying something on the phone about how we're willing to give our expired things or nearly expired cans off the shelf to the local food pantry, but we wouldn't give them our best we're not giving them our best. We're giving them our least, our
Scraps.
rags. Yeah. And again, we come back to that matter of dignity. Are we truly dignifying these people? I also wonder, Ramona, this is just something I'm thinking about. If they're living kind of under this veil of fear, which I know some people are saying is increased right now, but I think that's a whole other issue. Um, are their stories getting out, or are they too scared to tell their stories because they're illegal? And that's unfortunate. For me, as someone that believes in the story and the truth, I can only imagine all the stories that we're not hearing about Ramona. And so
Right.
we're not getting an accurate picture. You've been able to share a few, but think of how those stories were extracted. They were extracted very privately and under a shadow, as you've said before. Um, there's so much truth and light that needs to come forward of what's really going on here. And I think once we are able to see that, then we can have true compassion and actually start solving some of these issues. So, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to share another story about a woman, and I don't know if we have time for it right now, but
Yeah,
maybe
go ahead.
take a break. Yeah, so, when you're talking about these real stories that we're not hearing, another one coming out of Florida, again, through 40 Days for Life volunteers and leaders, this is how we have these stories, because these are people working in the grassroots directly with these people. And again, it ties right back into abortion. This young woman who was here, migrant woman, she here's the other thing that people need to understand when it comes to abortion is that these women are also accessing abortion illegally. They're not only are they here illegally, but out of and of course, you're going to get the other side that says, well, this wouldn't happen if abortion was legal, right? But that's not true because um, just their legal status alone makes them afraid to seek out anything, legal or illegal. It doesn't matter. And so this particular mom or woman, she sought out abortion pills at a local Latin grocery store. So like just a bodega, what they would call a bodega. And was getting, obtained these abortion pills. And then of course she began to hemorrhage. She had to go to the emergency room. She finally had to go to the emergency room where she would have died, and she was frightened to tell them in the emergency room, what had happened. Like she wasn't, and that's a story that we hear even from, citizens. That's not something unique, right? But
Mhm.
point is that after, she had the abortion, she was able to connect with one of our volunteers who was able to bring her in and get her, find her healing, and help her through the healing process of this horrible traumatic experience. And so what she shared with me is she said, Ramona, she was here illegally. She was frightened. She didn't know what to do. She had been abandoned. She was pregnant. She obtained this abortion through chemical means, through usage of the pill. And she said, and she, went to the hospital, has gone through this trauma. And she said, and it just added trauma on top of trauma. And that trauma that had already existed was the trauma of getting here, just the trauma of getting
Right.
to the US. And so like that's another thing that we're
Oh,
not talking about is the women who are being raped, the children that are being raped, the women who are being used on their trek to the US. Like we're not talking about that. And then
mm.
so now you come here and your solution, your quote unquote solution to a pregnancy after being abandoned by the father of your child is abortion. So now you've got this layer of trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma.
Ramona, this is a big mess, and we have to start thinking about it, and we have to start telling the stories, and we have to be thoughtful about it so that a truly just solution can be had. And we are called on as the body of Christ to help be part of that solution. So we will continue this conversation after the break with Ramona Trevino. Is supporting illegal immigration pro life? We'll be right back.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Well, welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. I'm having an engaging discussion. I hope you're enjoying it with Ramona Trevino. The question we're trying to answer today is supporting illegal immigration pro-life? And so we're trying to sort through some of these topics of interest that have been on the news a lot lately. And Ramona has a perspective from someone who works for 40 Days for Life nationally. She also has a heritage that is Mexican American and Spanish, and so she has that vantage point that I don't have here in North Dakota. However, we do have a lot of migrants from the Texas area coming up here. And ultimately our country, we're all one. We all are affected by the different decisions, and we definitely have immigration here from different countries. So, one of the things, Ramona, that I was thinking about after our phone conversation the other day was the quick fix and how these two topics, abortion and illegal immigration, come together because in each case with abortion, that's the quick fix, and then you forget about it. And with illegal immigration, too, let's let everyone in, no constraints, and then forget about it. Both of these things aren't thought through. We don't look at the stories of the mothers who are, shattered, and maybe it's going to take 10 years for them to realize that child that they keep thinking of is no longer an option, and that they were a mother, and that if only they'd had support, right? And then the illegal immigration too. And I think both of these situations, they live under a shadow of shame. We talked about that a little bit, how being illegal um, puts constraints around what you can do. And I think the same is true with post-abortive women. They
Absolutely.
also have constraints around their hearts and their souls, and they're told certain things that aren't the truth. And then there's trauma that they experience from the abortion, from not having been supported. So there are actually a lot of parallels in between these two. But I think the correlating thing is that the quick fix that we seem to want to offer people, and that is not how the body of Christ operates. We don't do the quick thing and then you escape. We don't throw money and then look the other way. We are there for the long haul because the end game is heaven. And we
Right.
are we are it is a demand that Christ put on us to be there to welcome the stranger, but not in a way that's going to degrade them.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what you've seen down there, some of the abortion numbers, and also how Planned Parenthood sets up shop near some of these areas where there's a lot of immigrants.
Yeah, so I just want to briefly just kind of circle back to what you said because it's such a valid statement and it's such a great picture that you've painted there in reference to the parallel. Um, anything worth having requires work, right? And there's always consequences to everything that we do, whether that consequence is good or bad. And so I think that's one of the things that's the point that people are missing is that, you know, we're not saying that the immigrant isn't welcome. We're all immigrants in some way or another, right? We've all immigrated. Our ancestors have immigrated, but when it comes to illegal immigration, it is like you said, it's a quick fix that has consequences, and that consequence, um, we're going to see it throughout decades of just changing of the guard, right, so to speak, the changing of
Mhm.
administrations and the laws. And I have some people that I know that are dear friends of our family who have been here for decades, from back from the Clinton administration, and they are still working all of these decades later for their legal statuses. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what I'm
Mm.
saying is that we cannot point the finger at just one particular administration and say, for example, Trump, that now we're going to just vilify him because he's trying to reform things. Everyone should have been working for reform. Everyone, like all of these people, and that's why I'm bringing this particular family up, is because from the Clinton administration, they've been trying to work on doing the things the right way, right? And they've been unable to do that, and they're still working on that. So that's what I'm saying is it doesn't matter who is leading. What matters is that we need reform, and that's for the sake of the people who are trying to um, get things done the right and proper way. And so, if someone comes here illegally, they're not thinking about the future. They're not thinking about what happens down the road when things change and there's shifts in, politics and laws and things like that. They're just being sold a bill of goods that this is easy and just come on over and everything's going to be fine. And it's the same thing that women are being sold, like pregnant women, that they're being sold a false bill of goods,
Mm,
that the solution to all of your problems is this abortion and everything will be fine, and then you realize no, it isn't fine. So yeah, that parallel
yes.
is really a good one, Roxanne, and I think it's something that we need to think about. But in terms of just like the numbers that we see, I think in 2021 to 2022, and these numbers are always kind of off by one or two, but the statistics at that time were that 26% of abortions were committed against Hispanic people. Um, and Planned Parenthood is notorious. So, like, if you think about that 26% number, and then you take the Black population, which I think is 34%. So you're looking at um, over 50% of abortions, right, that are being committed against. So almost 60% of abortions that are being committed on minorities. And that's not taking into account Asians and Pacific Islanders and people who identify as other races, so the majority of abortions are being committed on people of color. And that's something that we really need to take a closer look at, because again, it speaks to the end goal of Margaret Sanger and the people like her who support abortion, who see it as a way to to control certain populations of people. And so I always I always have this little reservations when we as pro-lifers are being called out as the bad guys, because we want and to see, smart, logical, reasonable immigration reform, and then somehow being called unmerciful because we're also pro-life and we are against abortion. You know what I mean?
Well
But
well, again, it's the easy thing to do is just call us a name, just the quick fix. Just do the name and deflect.
yes,
Don't
and
look into the heart. Mhm.
yeah, don't look into the heart, don't look into where they're coming from. And this is why I think this conversation that we're having is so important, because people can hear this is where our heart is. This is where our heart is. We as pro-lifers are seeing, the fallout for not just the women here who are citizens and, the crisis that they're experiencing, but we also are seeing, this trauma that is being layered upon already pre-existing trauma for women who are coming here illegally, and all of the challenges that entails, and so we're seeing this from that perspective, and this is why we care about the issue. This is what I want people to know, is that we care about this issue because we care about humanity and we care about people.
I was when you were talking about, people of color being targeted, I just was thinking about what that must be like when they start to awaken to that and realize that they've been like that some of the people in our country are actually trying to get rid of them. I mean, that just is has to be so shattering. What when you wake up to that,
Yeah, when you
um
look at the history of this organization, when you look at the history of Planned Parenthood and eugenics and the tie with that, um, and then I would hope too that people who um, do care about social justice and they do care about um, immigrants of all forms, whether legal or illegal, I would hope and pray that this gives them pause and that they can look at and just kind of re-examine their own personal stance on abortion as well, and kind of see how this all ties in together with the other side continuously promoting this um, open border idea, and then turning around, like you had said once before, at we welcome you, we don't welcome your offspring.
Right, right. I grew up on a reservation, Lakota and Assiniboine, and one of the things I really grew to value was their appreciation for their people. They were survivors, and their richness was in their their loved ones. And I think that's very true of the Mexican culture, Mexican American culture, and a lot in African and all those. I mean, sadly, I don't know that we're as in tune to that, but we tend to, I think, in America, see our riches is in things more, and that's a human sinful approach that I guess comes along a little bit with how we, built our country. But having grown up in an environment where the people were the richness, it's devastating to me that we're degrading the treasures of the unique individuals in our lives that we are to love, that we are somehow buying into this thing that we have to separate from them, and that we have to not treat them with respect, and just to get rid of them, just to cancel people.
Well, you bring up a good point. These are people who are coming and are inherently pro-life because they haven't been propagandized for the past 50 years, right? They've it's not something new. Abortion is a novelty because the US is taking abortion to these countries, particularly in, South America, Latin America, and Africa. This is where they're being targeted. The abortion um, giants are going and setting up shop, like Planned Parenthood and Marie Stopes and others are setting up shop in these countries, and they're continuing to try to legalize abortion through all of their countries. And this is something that they reject. It's not part of their lexicon. The pro life
Mhm.
terminology is not part of their lexicon. Like they don't even know what that means because it just is ridiculous to them to have to call yourself pro life. And so then they come
Mm.
here and they have no idea that their children are being indoctrinated in the school with, these types of ideologies. They don't know that
Right.
they're being targeted as a community. They don't even know that they're being targeted as a community to abort. That the abortion industry wants to get rid of them. And this is all again, following suit with what Margaret Sanger wanted. And it's pretty eye opening from my perspective to share that with people and then see their reactions and hear their reactions to this.
Mm. Let me ask you this. Why? Why are we doing this to other countries, do you think? What is the purpose? Why do we feel like we need to go to other countries, not to mention our own, to go abort people?
Well, right. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is population control. That was obviously that was the eugenics type of mentality that only certain people had were worthy of reproducing, that only certain people deserved to be here. It goes back to even the Nazis in Germany who were inspired by the eugenics of America to get rid of certain people that they saw that they deemed unworthy. And so that's kind of where my mind goes automatically to there are certain people who think that others don't deserve to be here and who are less than. And so they want to not only control the population, but they also think that they're unworthy to reproduce.
So that's your perspective. Let's look at this a little bit differently. What do you think their perspective is? What do you think they're saying is the reason that they need to do that?
When you refer to they, who are you referring to? Like the abortion
Like our government, I guess, or whatever entity is going over and trying to push
promote
abortion and contraception. What do you think their purpose is? I'm trying to get at. I'm just trying to understand what their mentality is, because of course what you just said is what I believe also, but they're probably not saying it that way. What do you think they're saying as far as why we need to control um those other populations? I'm thinking one of the reasons might be that we feel like we're their parent and we feel like we need to make sure there's enough food for everyone, so we got to make sure
Yeah,
there's right.
I think also part of it is they think that this is the solution to human suffering. So if there is, any particular group of people who they see as, they don't have enough, they don't have, again, it goes back to what are we prioritizing? Are we prioritizing family and children and the gift of fertility over things, material things that don't last? And I think that is part of it. You know, we
Mm.
we have a lot of people here in this country who don't cherish human beings, don't cherish the gift of life, and who have valued, this false idea of freedom, of being able to do what you want with your money and have this freedom without the quote unquote burden of children, to live life as you want. And they somehow I guess want to impose that on other people, that unless they're living that way, then they must not be happy, that it must be a life of suffering.
Yeah, I would say that that seems so offensive to me that we think we can put our values on others, and it's like we're still conquering, we're still, you know, plundering through other places in the world. It rubs me the wrong way, and then we think we can bring them all over here and do the same when they're here. I think we're on a bad track, and I don't know what the answer is, Ramona. Maybe you have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is either, Roxanne, other than it just like you the only thing I can think of is, what did we look like in this country prior to um Planned Parenthood? And of course, I always say prior to the legalization of birth control. I even go that far back, because again, I think when we talk about abortion, not to take us on some other crazy tangent, but it always brings me back to birth control. And obviously, you had me on the first time and we spoke about that. And
Mhm.
and I think that's really where it all began, because again, it's in the words birth control. We're trying to control our fertility. We're trying to control birth. We're trying to control the number of people that we have, the number of children that we have. And we've lost sight, by doing that, we've lost sight of the value of the human person, and what a gift it is for us to be able to have children. And we in this country, we don't celebrate pregnancy, and
Mm.
I'm assuming I wasn't born, and before, I was born after the legalization of birth control and abortion. But I don't know what that was like before that. I would imagine that anytime someone announced that they were pregnant, there was a celebration and people were happy
Mhm.
for you, you know? And so we now live in a time where we're not celebrating each other, and we're not, congratulating women on being pregnant. And it's just very sad. And it's not like that in other countries.
There's a selfishness that is taking over our hearts, and, there's a closeness to life instead of an openness to life, because we think that now we can control that, and in fact, we're imprisoning ourselves. We're closing ourselves off to a fruitfulness that God wanted us to have, and we're in our little prisons without even realizing it. That's the way I see it. My 5 children are, have made me discover more about myself and helped me heal through some of the past and helped me learn about who I am. It's not easy, but I can't imagine. I know that God gave them to me as a gift, not only for their own lives, which are unique and beautiful and unrepeatable, and in their very own self, they have purpose, but for me too, to learn to be a better person and to draw closer to Him. Yeah, I just think it's huge that we've lost that, and I guess that's getting a little bit off track, but at the same time, it all comes back to life and how we're regarding it. And I do want to ask one other thing about the name calling and the misperceptions. How do we deal with that, Ramona? Because it gets old, and you were on the other side of that for a while, where you were kind of hearing the mottos and the mantras that, Planned Parenthood put out. So how do we combat the lies that are in the culture through the
Mhm.
media and social media and otherwise?
Prior to my conversion, I probably would have been also name calling. I probably would have also been, calling everybody racists, and just I don't know. I just imagine that I would have, because prior to my conversion, I was more about the identity of I wasn't looking at myself through the eyes of Christ and seeing myself as a child of Christ. You know what I mean? I was more wrapped up in the identity that the world wanted to put on me. So I was about, like my Mexican ancestry and my skin color. And you become that person that kind of worships that versus worshiping God and then seeing yourself through that lens to where you now see yourself as a Christian, right? Like your identity now is wrapped up as a Christian. And because of that, you look at the world differently, and I look at the world much differently now than I did before my conversion. And for the most part, I want to tell people that people are good. People are good. The narrative in the media is to paint us all as hateful people who are unwelcoming, and I haven't seen that in the real life. I don't see that in the real world, and I definitely don't see that in the pro-life grassroots ministries. I don't see that. So I don't really know who they're referring to when they talk about people being, hateful and racist and whatnot.
Yeah, and again, I just see it as a easy thing to do is just to throw out some sort of insult and then deflect from the heart. I love what you said about finding your dignity in Christ because it is what really binds us together. And I love when other people discover that. When they discover that their dignity isn't in their skin color. It isn't in, any exterior thing. It's not in if you're female or male. It is in who you are as a child of God and that you are valued in and of yourself just because you exist. But of course, it's hard to value people that don't exist that we haven't given a chance, right? But I just love how that brings us together and uplifts and to be bound by skin color. It is just such a mirage, and it leads us it's a delusion. It leads us in the wrong places and creates perpetual victimhood, right? And it is Christ who frees us from that. And I heard that in what you were just saying. And maybe that's one of
Yeah,
the things we want to end with. It just, yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thing to end with that for sure, Roxanne, because it is there is so much freedom, and I've experienced that freedom in where I am not caught up in this illusion of the world that limits my abilities and limits who I am. And like you said, creating this perpetual victimhood that doesn't exist for me, but rather just recognizing that we're human. And as human beings, we're going to fail and we're going to mistreat each other. And it doesn't really matter, like what I've realized, it doesn't matter what color our skin is. We're human and we're going to mistreat each other regardless of our skin
Hmm.
color, regardless of our
Hmm.
nationality. Like we're prone to that, to be sinful. And um, so it's different when you look at it through the lens of a Christian because you realize that you're being held to a different standard than what the world holds you to.
That's right. Well, I want to come back to our originating question, which is supporting illegal immigration pro-life? What's your summation, Ramona? Are we being pro-life by supporting illegal immigration?
In my personal experiences, I would say no. No, we're not being pro-life, and that is not only looking at it from the perspective of the baby in the womb, who is now at higher risk of losing his or her life, but also the mothers who are finding themselves in crisis and who've gone through a tremendous amount of trauma just being here, but also from the perspective of the immigrant himself who or herself who is worthy of more than scraps.
Mm, we've got to get back to that somehow. I know that that is God's vision, and no matter where we're from, what ties us all together is our humanity, right? And the fact that we all, like you said, we can all sin, we can all do good. What are we going to choose? Today we get a choice. Every day God gives us a choice to move towards life or death, and that's every moment of our lives we are given that. So thank you so much, Ramona, for I think uncovering some different layers here than maybe some people haven't thought of that I hadn't thought of until we started talking. I think it's important to peel back those layers and take a peek and really get to the heart of the matter and realize this isn't just a black and white thing. There's a lot of stories here that need to be shared and shed, and so I hope that we can do that. So let's revisit later on after things have gone on a while. And I'm sure there's going to be things that are going to come up. And I hope we can have another conversation about it.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much, Roxanne, for just the opportunity.
Absolutely. God bless you, Ramona. We'll talk to you soon.
God bless you too.
Is supporting illegal immigration pro-life? Many, especially those in ivory towers perhaps, might say so emphatically, but what do the real stories on the ground tell us? How humane is it to open wide our borders but not have the resources to offer a just and dignified life to those seeking refuge? The government can only go so far. Big Brother cannot ultimately look with sincere compassion at someone who is scared and uncertain about how they will find their next meal. That has to come from the heart and from our humanity. Though the immigration crisis calls to us desperately right now, very often the one most vulnerable can be found closer to home. We cannot meet the needs of the world and ignore our own families. The great Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta made things very simple for us when she said, "If you want to change the world, go home and love your family." The work of compassion and mercy must start there, and from there, charity spreads. Here's another thought. How many people have we erased that might have helped solve this crisis sooner by eliminating them through abortion? Getting rid of people has never helped solve any of our problems. It has only exacerbated them in the end. As Ramona said, this isn't a new problem brought on by a new administration. It's been ongoing for decades. As Pope St. John Paul II put it in his Message for the World Day of Peace in 2001, the challenge is to combine the welcome due every human being, especially when in need, with a reckoning of what is necessary for both the local inhabitants and the new arrivals to live a dignified and peaceful life. Boom. Well, in our next episode, we'll circle back to the conversation we'd started with Tim Mosier a few weeks ago, asking not just does the church hate sex, but going even deeper into this issue of the church's vision for sexuality. But why does it also seem to look down on such advances as surrogacy and IVF? We'll speak about that in a couple of weeks, and until then, don't lose sight of the light.